my sweetheart, Eula, married for 62 years happily, mother of the photographer over there, Carol Burns, and of Kathy Krieger, right? And over here is my granddaughter, the lovely Alana. And over here is Einstein. Oh no, it's not Einstein. His name is Brian Burns, and he's a terrific young grandson. Now let me just say a few words about this. This fence did not exist here when I grew up. So you just walk out on the tracks, and people were killed at this intersection frequently. And the most common killing, people would walk out on the track watching the train coming so they wouldn't get hit. And then they didn't see the one coming the other way, and they'd get hit. And so that was always happening. Now this sign, Bristol, Virginia, and Tennessee, has lights in it, and it's lit up, and it's a beautiful sign that everybody on the train knows that. Now what really impressed me is the big thing in Bristol were the trains. There was nothing here except the great big trains that came in. And the 41 and 42 would come through at about 11 o'clock at night, pulling all sorts of cars with people headed to New Orleans, rich people, cars loaded with people smoking cigars, and a place where they could sit down and eat. And you think, did I ever ride on one of those? But what was sad, see up at the end, the gate up at the end, Carol? Can you turn around?
I will be, yeah.
Yeah, the gate. This is where they put the bodies off, up on that end. And so all the young people in East Tennessee and Southwest Virginia, this was the main place the bodies were taken off from the Second World War, in which my next door neighbor was killed, lots of people were killed. And you come here at night at 11 o'clock to see the train go through. And it got very depressing to see all the people crying up there around picking up the coffins to go bury their children who were killed in the war. Makes you patriotic, to say the least. And that was a sad day. But when George S.E.Massengill, who was the head of the army and everything, he decided to send a train through. And what was the name of that train where we put the pots and pans on? Right?
Freedom Train.
Freedom Train. So after the war was over, a big long train came through every town, and it would stop. And you go down and put toys on for little children in Europe. And you put blankets and pans and anything you could give the people of Europe. Their place had been bombed out to rubble. And so George Marshall of his Freedom Train really brought good stuff to the people of Europe. Then he decided, the American government did, to rebuild Japan and Berlin and Italy, and everything had been bombed out. And so it became the George C. Marshall, the Marshall Plan. He hated that. He did not want his names on anything. And so when he died, later on before he died, they gave him the Nobel Prize for his great kindness. And he was an extremely kind man who went to VMI up at Lexington. He was one of my heroes, George C. Marshall. So I stood here when the Freedom Train came through. We put all of our toys on, everything you could get rid of that you thought somebody would like in Europe. We put it on the Freedom Train. And it was the Goodwill Train of America. It was also here, a train came in called the Scout Train. And it's headed for Valley Forge. And it stopped in every town and picked up 4 or 5 scouts. And it had gotten the honor of being selected for Valley Forge. So it was the big Scout Train. And it rolled up the East Coast, and it headed for up in Pennsylvania. And so we had a terrific time. The next one I remember, and Eula may remember this, is they decided to have everything for the American people to look at. So they put the Declaration of Independence, all these famous documents on the train, and they pulled that train through every town. Get on it, you'll see the Declarations of Independence and the things that they could show. And then, of course, when very famous people were killed, like Bobby Kennedy, and assassinated, big trains covered with black, like they had for Abraham Lincoln, would tour through these cities. And we were not here then when that happened. certain Baltimore stood on the railroad track and watched those trains with the Kennedy on it go through. It was a great moment. But this brings back, if I could do one thing each day, I'd want to come with my father down here and watch those big trains roll through late at night. My mother thought I shouldn't be up that late. And she didn't like me coming down here. She thought it was depressing for me being subjected to all that deaths of the soldiers. And she thought it made me want to be a soldier and all this. And it did. It made me very patriotic. But it didn't stop. Now, if you walk up this track, and you go straight up this track, you come to the grocery store called the Coffee Grocery, which is right up there at the bridge, way up. We're going to go up there. And the coffee, and if you keep going, Columbia Paper Company's up there on the right. And we lived up there on the across the railroad. Everybody in our family worked for the railroad. My father worked for the railroad, my uncles. Now, they didn't work on them forever, but for short periods of time, everybody got a job on the railway. Now, my most famous memory in this railway station was right over there. See that fence along there where that wall is? There was tracks in there. And that's where Ringling Brothers Circus put the elephants and the lions and everything. They put in these big cars, and they were full of horses down the street, the State Street. And this place was lined with thousands of people. And here comes giraffes and lions and clowns and piccolos and steam things. And you've never seen this stuff, you know? I've never seen an elephant. And it was just beyond belief good. And the other one was the 4th of July parade here. We were standing on this street down here, and the first big jets came into the world. And they flew out of North Carolina, and these big fighter jets across State Street, 6 of them coming in a line, and the whole earth rocked. And you look at this and say, this is incredible. Now, up on the hill is this beautiful church. That's a Baptist church, and that's where the coffees went. If you weren't Methodist, you were Baptist. And you either went down here to the Reynolds Memorial and the State Street Church, which Reverend J.O. Straley went to, or you went to the Baptist church. This was Troop 8, and Troop 8 was in, Troop 3 is on this side, which I was in. It was Presbyterian. We did not like these guys, and in everything we did, there was a fight, not a fight, but contest between Troop 8 and Troop 3. And all the coffees, Davy Coffee, Howard Coffee, Gene Coffee, went to Troop 8. All the Tennessee crowd went to Troop 3. And you can imagine when the big contest sprung up at the camp, it was between 8 and 3. Virginia versus Tennessee. Now, the Tennessee people did not like the Virginia people. And Virginia High School was called the Bearcats. Tennessee High was called the Vikings. But President Obama spoke up at Virginia High, a few years back. And so this was a great moment. Now, the people who had a big effect on me doing chemistry was the S.E.Massengill Company. And the S.E.Massengill Company was an old-time group of people, goes back in the 1700s, who made herbs and drugs. And they built a factory to make medicine in Bristol. And Hopkins came up with sulfa drugs, and it saved little children. The trouble was you had to take big pills, and they were hard to swallow. And so they thought, wouldn't it be good if we could dissolve those in sugar water? And it didn't work with sugar, but they came up with one sugar that is dissolved in beautifully. And they sent out package after package after package of sulfa drug to save children dissolved in ethylene glycol. Now, ethylene glycol, when it gets burned in your body weeks later, will kill you and knocks out your kidney. And children were dying all over the United States, and they couldn't figure out what it was from. And then they found, because they sent a case of this into Africa, and all the children died, that it was S.E.Massengill sulfa drug. And so the guy who came up with this beautiful way to dissolve it committed suicide. he couldn't stand it. He killed all those children. The big governor of the state was Kefauver. And Kefauver said Kefauver came up with a pure food and drug plan, and the FDA started out of here. But the big chemical plant was still here for Massengill. They also made birth control trick things, and all the churches hated douches, vinegar douches, and all that. And so I'm going to show you where that is. Step over here. And I went in there to learn chemistry. That big building you see up there on the hill at the skyline up there is the S.E.Massengill company. It's still there. I think it's called Beecham now. It's been taken over by everybody. But I went in there and they took me through and showed me the Boy Scouts. One of the scout leaders was a man who was a chemist there. And he found out I like to make gunpowder and shoot stuff off. And he said, come on up, let me show you how we use that for the good. And I was so impressed. And so they had a scout booth down here at King's, which is that store down on Scout Day. And that's that famous thing where you see me standing in the chemistry scout booth, put on by S.E.Massengill, by the scout leader who worked up there. So taking time with scouts and learning everything from swimming to working with nature makes a difference. Now, Dr. Herndon, I'm backing up now to Elizabeth. Dr. Herndon was not only a great chemist, he loved birds. And I thought he was sissy, so I went out with him just to make him happy. And I was amazed. He showed me stuff about eagles and birds and ospreys. And I came back to Bristol, and he gave me a book called Peterson's Guide to the Bird. And Wallace had hurt his foot, and so I gave him that. And he thought, oh, come on. He was a big athlete with a bad ankle. And he fell in love with the birds. And a young kid going through the backyard saved a peregrine falcon. He grew up to become one of the great birders at Cornell. He's retired now. And he's the one who brought the peregrine falcon back from extinction. They were all gone, but a few, and he brought them back. And
he being?
And that's Scarlet in downtown Baltimore. The big USF&G has a bird up there named Scarlet, who flew in there from the Chesapeake Bay, one of the birds that he had revived.
He being?
He being a kid named Smith. And he was a little kid trained by Wallace who loved birds in the backyard. And so there's just more and more stuff you wouldn't believe of what's happened to the world. And Wallace has had a big impact on restoring eagles and restoring all sorts of birds.
And
one of the pictures
right?
one of the pictures I show at every lecture I give is a picture of Carol as a little teeny girl with a falcon on her. It's not a peregrine falcon, but it's a falcon. And she's standing in our backyard, and I use that with the sun to show you that this is all one thing. That we're very much part of trees and newts and salamanders and fish and these flowers there. And so I go through why this is so important. And then occasionally somebody gets a cancer out, 1 in 3, and it goes berserk, nature does, and we're trying to figure out what it is. So anyway, this all came out of Elizabeth and Wallace, your mother, Eula, who decided to carry out in 1953 a joint effort together to go work on cancer. That's why we went to Baltimore with Westinghouse, with fabrics, and that's why we left there and gave up a wonderful job in space to go up. And she worked as a technician to put me through school. And I washed glasses and swept the floor to get in. I'd never get in, and worked my way out. And then I became the big professor there. So it's all with dedication to the Lord. And what we thought was, and still think, was a very big calling. And so this is